Hey guys, how's it going? Laura with Garden Answer. In today's video, I thought it'd be really fun to go over some of the new plant introductions that Proven Winners is coming out with this year. It's snowy outside and cold, and I know a lot of us are right in the middle of garden planning for this next year. Spring fever is starting to settle in, at least for me anyway, so going through and looking at brand new plants that are coming out that are full of color and bright, it just kind of feeds something inside of me. So there are a lot of new plants coming out in shrubs, perennials, and annuals. What I did is I went through and chose 15 annuals that I think are really pretty, and really just because they're just so bright and beautiful, I thought that you guys would really like to see them. So I've got my laptop right in front of me with my list so I don't get off track, and we'll just jump right into the list. So the first one is a golden butterfly marguerite daisy, also called an agaranthemum. I had the opportunity to grow this plant last year, kind of try it out in my garden, and I had extremely good luck. I planted it in a really neat galvanized container along with some super bells and white nemesia, and that as a centerpiece was just so gorgeous. And I think that's what I really like about this plant, is that it's one that'll grow a little bit bigger, so like 18 to 36 inches tall, so it's really great as a thriller in a container. So I had my planters in pretty much full sun, and the plants just did wonderfully. I didn't take any really great after shots. I have one photo where it's kind of in the background. I was taking a picture of Dexter, our kitty, at the time, and you can see though that butterfly, the golden butterfly in the background, just kind of shining and looking beautiful. And also it's a really good landscape plant just because it grows so quickly and it gets so large that it's really a great one to tuck into your landscape for a really bright color. And it's kind of like you've got a daisy that usually when we have perennial daisies in the garden, they bloom for a few weeks and that's about it. You need to cut them back and then it takes forever for them to bloom again. But if you plant something like this that has that daisy structure but wants to bloom all the way through the season, then you get to enjoy that color for so much longer. The second one is a Lady Godiva orange calendula, which I'm so excited about because this one has been bred with a different species than your normal seed calendula, which makes it far less susceptible to powdery mildew. The heat tolerance is much better. They bloom from early on in the season all the way through a hard frost, and then their flowers are really gorgeous. So they're really large flowers that are double, which makes the plant a little bit more sterile than your normal seed calendula. So the seed set isn't quite as great, and it won't seed everywhere in your garden, which is kind of nice to be able to put a calendula in and know it's not going to try to take over. And I also thought it was interesting that this calendula is actually a zone 7 through 11. So it's definitely an annual in my zone 5 area, but some of you guys might be able to get this plant to be a perennial in your garden, which is so neat. They like part sun to sun, so I mean they can be tucked in a lot of different areas in your garden. They can handle a little bit of a dry down in containers, so if they're put in containers and they get mist or something like that, they can handle that. Not ideal, but it's kind of nice to know that there's that. You also don't have to deadhead these either, so you can if like visibly it looks better to you, but you don't have to in order for them to keep blooming. The third one is Super Bell's Double Ruby, and if you guys have watched our videos for any amount of time, you know that I don't tend to go for red colors in my garden, but I really am excited about this one because it's a color of red that's really, it's a beautiful color. It's more on the cool side of red, kind of more along the burgundy tones, and the double, the structure of the flower, anything double, and I'm just a total sucker for it. I think it's such a pretty, like a mini rose shape almost. And these bloom for like 6 months out of the year. I mean, they bloom from the time you plant them until like through a really good hard frost, and you really can't beat that. I was able to try this in a couple of containers last year as well and had really good success with it. And you may have seen this if you live in Canada. It has been sold for a number of years there, but this is the first year it's available in the US. They can spread up to 24 inches, which makes them a really fun spiller plant, kind of coming out of a hanging basket or the side of a container and really softening the look of an arrangement. They like part sun to sun, so you can really use them in a lot of different combinations with other plants, and they are heat tolerant, which is nice. They also do attract hummingbirds. Number 4 is Super Bell's Blue Moon Punch, and you guys, I don't know if I can tell you a favorite off of this list, but I love purple flowers, and the fact that this one has that deep purple eye and then kind of the deeper lavender around the outside, I think it's just such an eye-catching plant. They're a really, really good performer. They like part sun to sun. They do attract hummingbirds just like the Super Bell's Double Ruby, but their flowers are very large, which is really fun. I got to try this one in a couple of containers as well last year, and they did really great for me. The thing about Super Bells, all Super Bells, is that they do do prefer to be trimmed back every once in a while. So sometimes they'll recommend that you give them a light trim right when you plant them, and it kind of encourages better branching, kind of a thicker plant, more blooms. You might lose a couple blooms when you do cut it back, but it'll come back and flush back with blooms really quickly. And then kind of an overall trim in late July or early August is a really good idea for these plants as well, because it just gives them a little bit more energy, it gives them a kick, and they will flush back out with a ton of blooms, and they'll be a nice, thick, prolific plant. Number 5 is Super Bell's Rising Star, and this one's definitely a bright pop for your garden. I mean, the bright pink, and then you've got a really nice, thick yellow stripe between each one of the kind of petals that creates a kind of a star shape in there. And these ones are a continuous bloomer that go through the whole season. They attract hummingbirds. They're just a really great annual plant. And one other thing about Super Bells just in general is that they really like good drainage. They're really great plants for containers and hanging baskets because they like to be watered, but they like that water to kind of go through quickly and not sit around their roots. They like to dry down just a slight bit, have that soil dry down a little bit between waterings. So they're not really suited for in-ground like landscape planting, but great for containers. Number 6 is Fairy Dust Pink Kufia, and you guys might be familiar with the Kufia called Vermillionaire that has long red tube-shaped flowers that attract tons of hummingbirds to your garden. So this is just a different variety, little different structure of flower. They're pink, and it's just a really pretty plant to use, especially in a combination planter. So you can kind of use it like you would use a Diamond Frost Euphorbia. So Diamond Frost Euphorbia has this real ethereal look to it, kind of just this airy looking plant with really pretty delicate looking white flowers on the top, that if you've got it planted in a container with other things that have got a lot of weighty blooms maybe toward the bottom, these type of plants can rise above and kind of create that really airy, beautiful look. And this Fairy Dust gives you kind of the same look, but in pink. This plant loves the heat and humidity of summer, which is really great. It keeps on blooming from the time you plant it all the way through hard frost. It can take all the heat, it can take the sun, and it'll just keep on producing flowers. You don't have to deadhead it. Of course, it's always good to fertilize, like I said in the beginning, keep fertilizing your plants on a weekly basis, and it keeps them really prolific and strong blooming. So number 7 and 8 are both type of Hypoestes or polka dot plants, which might be a really familiar plant to you because a version of this type of plant has been sold as a houseplant for a number of years. The two I want to show you today are called Hippo Red and Hippo Rose. So the Hippo Red has beautiful red and green, very striking foliage, and Hippo Rose has pink and green foliage. The fun part about this plant in particular is that they have been bred to be bigger, stockier, fuller plants. They grow 16 to 22 inches tall, which makes them such a great plant to use out in a combination planter. You can use them out in the landscape. They're really adaptable to different types of lighting situations. So you can use them in more sun where their colors will be extremely pronounced and intense. Or you could use them in a shady location. Their colors won't be quite as intense as they would be in the sun, but still very beautiful. I kind of look at them almost as another version of a coleus. Because we grow coleus for foliage. These we grow for foliage as well. And they're still really good as a house plant. So if you use them outside in a planter, or if you've got them in the landscape, you can repot them, clean them up, bring them inside for the winter, and still enjoy them for the rest of the year. Number 9 is called Delightful Tupelo Honey Dahlia. And this one I am so excited to be able to try to grow. I haven't had a chance to grow this one yet. I love the colors, and who doesn't like dahlias, right? Like, they're such pretty flowers to cut and bring inside. They're gorgeous to enjoy out in your garden. This one is a really pretty yellow with kind of amber tones toward the edges of the petals, kind of that apricot-y color, and I just really love that in my garden. And it grows quite big, so like 24 to 30 inches tall and maybe 20 to 24 inches wide. So it can be used as a great thriller in a container because it does bloom for most of the season. And it's also great for planting in your landscape somewhere. The thing about this one that makes it different is that this one was bred to not form tubers like normal dahlias, which makes them a much better performer through the season. So when they're not forming tubers, it makes them less sensitive to day length. So they'll start blooming a lot earlier in the season, and they'll continue to bloom through the season. So you can really enjoy continuous blooms, which I think is really great. Sometimes they will form tubers. If you do find them, you can dig them up and store them like you would normal dahlia tubers and plant them the next late spring. They also do attract butterflies. They're very heat tolerant, and they also are resistant to powdery mildew, which is a huge deal, especially for my area. I don't know about you guys, but dahlias always seem to be affected by powdery mildew. So to have some varieties that don't have that issue is really nice. And the last thing is that they do benefit from a little protection from the hot, hot afternoon sun. So if they can get a good block of morning sun and then maybe some filtered sun through that hot part of the afternoon, they'll perform a whole lot better for you. So the next couple, number 10 and 11, are both Supertunias. So the first one is a Supertunia Hot Pink Charm. And I can't say enough good things about Supertunias. You guys know that I plant a ton of them in my garden. And if there was one plant that I could tell you and encourage you to plant in your garden for huge color with no maintenance, it would be a Supertunia. So I really like this Hot Pink Charm. It's just a really pretty color of pink. I like pinks in my garden anyway. They bloom from the time you plant them all the way through a hard frost. And I'm like talking a hard frost. We enjoyed our Supertunias all the way into, I can't even remember what day it was. It was like in November sometime this year, really close to Thanksgiving, and we still had blooms on our plants. That is a really great plant, especially when they have to go through 105, 108 degree days with winds, really dry climate. That's what we have here. So I just highly recommend this type of plant as a great annual for your garden. The second one is Supertunia Mulberry Charm, and I think that this is such a sweet looking flower. It's kind of an alternative to the Supertunia Bordeaux, which is more of a purple with that deep veining. This is just, the Mulberry Charm is more of a pink version of that. So it just gives you a little bit more option. The other thing about Supertunias that I think is just such a huge benefit is that they're self-cleaning. So if you've grown any of the older varieties of petunias or other varieties that are available out there, you know how much of a pain it can be to go out there and deadhead them. It can take a lot of time in order to make the plant look good and to keep it blooming. You do not have to do that with Supertunias, and I think that is just so great. Number 12 is called Ruck and Deep Purple Salvia, and this plant is the pollinator's dream. If you are wanting to attract pollinators like bees, hummingbirds, butterflies to your garden, this is the plant you want to go with. And while it attracts all the pollinators, it also resists deer. So it kind of gives you that added benefit. If you deal with deer in your garden, this is a great one as well. So this one will bloom all the way from the time you plant it through a hard frost. The fun thing about this one is that the calyx, so the sepals that form around the petals of the bloom that kind of rest underneath the bloom during the season, they stay really dark purple color. They don't dry out and look bad. So it always appears like your plant is in bloom, which is a really, really nice benefit. They're heat tolerant, drought tolerant, and they will continue to bloom even without being deadheaded, and they're sterile. So that means they're not trying to set seeds, so they will just keep blooming and blooming and blooming all throughout the season. They also grow quite large, so they can get upwards of about 40 inches, and they grow pretty quickly. So they're a really great option to tuck into your landscape anywhere where you've got a nice sunny location. If you're wanting to create a pollinator's garden, this is the plant you want to get. Number 13 is Superbena Stormburst, and I grew these last year in one of my containers, actually 4 of my containers, and they did so wonderfully. They have huge flowers, and I love the color, that lavender and purple kind of bicolor. And in terms of verbena, Superbenas as a series are the most heat tolerant, the most vigorous, the most tolerant of mildew, and they're also self-cleaning. They don't need to be deadheaded in order to keep blooming. So they're just a great, strong series. They also do equally as well in the landscape as they do in containers. They bloom from the second you plant them all the way through a hard frost. You just get to enjoy that color all season long. They like a nice sunny situation. They actually can take a little bit of drought once they're rooted in and established. They're just a really great annual plant. Number 14 is called Bright Lights Double Moon Glow African Daisy. It's a type of osteospermum, and I just love the color and the structure of this plant. The fact that it's an osteospermum, usually those type of flowers will close at night, but because of the structure of this flower being semi-double, you can see that really pretty frill of petals right in the middle. It keeps them from fully closing at night. So you still get to enjoy the blooms even when it's a cloudy or gray day or later on in the evening, which is so nice. So you don't lose that color and that kind of brightness in your garden. It is one of the most heat tolerant of the osteospermums, but it does prefer a spot where it's protected from afternoon sun. It's kind of more of a cool season crop. So if you've got a spot where it can get morning sun and then afternoon shade, that's perfect for this plant. Number 15, the last annual on my list, is called Tangerine Slice Appeal Black-Eyed Susan Vine, or it's a type of Thunbergia. So it is a vining annual. It's a really fast growing, so when you plant it, you'll get to enjoy a really full covering vine wherever you put it, whether it's on an arbor or a trellis or something like that. You could even put it in a hanging basket. It'll trail over the sides a little bit, and it'll also kind of crawl up the chains, which can create a really neat look. And this is the only bicolor Thunbergia that's out there. I think the color is fantastic. I actually am hoping to order some of these this year and grow them on a little picket fence around our vegetable garden, just because I think that they're such a great bright color. They can grow as tall as 60 to 96 inches in one season, which I think is amazing. Like, have you seen those bamboo teepees that you can like grow climbing beans on? Wouldn't it be beautiful to grow Thunbergia up one of those teepees and kind of create a little fort for kids, but it's going to be full of bloom rather than full of beans, which either one is fun. They like a nice sunny spot, and they will bloom from the time you plant them through a hard frost. And they just will keep blooming and blooming and blooming without needing to be deadheaded. So that's it for my list, and I only chose 15 out of a whole bunch of new introductions. So if you want to see more of them, we will put a link down below, and I will link to every single one of the plants that we talked about in this video if you want to get like more nitty-gritty details or just kind of read up a little bit more on them. And I would encourage you guys to go down to your local garden center and talk with whoever orders the plants and let them know some of the things that you would like to see. If any of these jumped out to you and you think, oh, I really want to try that, hope I can get my hands on it. Well, if you let your local garden centers know now, like early on in the season, then they can be watching for these new plants coming out, and they can know what you guys want to see. I know, coming from a garden center background, my parents own a garden center, we always appreciate knowing what people are looking at, what people are seeing, what they want to be planting, because that's what's fun. I mean, it's fun to see those things, and it's easy to get into a rut of ordering the same things over and over and over again from year to year. So having some encouragement from you guys is always helpful. So that's it, you guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you're having a great winter, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.